Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube video. To introduce myself, my name is Kimberly, and I am a freshman at Georgia State University. I am here to present an argumentative topic to you. As you know, we Catholics have been experiencing a bit of divide within the Church. Of course, I am referring to the event that changed it all, the Second Vatican Council. It was one of the most significant turning points in all Catholic history, which underlined a new example of papal authority being demonstrated. As Pope St. John XXIII formed together a massive assembly of bishops, theologians, and research universities from across the globe, the council sought to address many topics, such as the role of laity, papal hierarchy, and significance of tradition. These changes to everyday Catholic life began room for disagreement. It challenged the idea of how a pope should use his authority. Does the pope serve to guard tradition, or can he add on and change tradition? Here are the sections that I will address: the Catholic tradition and the papacy, the evolution of church practices, and addressing traditionalist concerns. The legacy of the Second Vatican Council continues as a central topic of debate as Catholics reflect on the future direction of the Church and her practices. Here in the modern day, we are witnessing a growing split that's being threatened by modernists in Germany to a growing number of American radical traditionalists who have gone so far as to establish their own papacy as a protest to our current one. Why? We are establishing beliefs based off of our feelings and not our ordered instructions that we are given by God. We need to use our brain's logic and not our heart's feelings to direct how we deal with these new changes. For in Jeremiah 17:9, the heart is deceitful above all things. So what do? There's no reason to overcomplicate this. It's why we have our holy book, our long years of history, and even God himself. This brings us to the first section of Arguing Vatican II, Catholic tradition and its papacy. The first groundwork we need to lay down is how Catholics are supposed to view the papacy. If we flip over to the Gospel of Matthew, we find that Christ himself says something interesting to the apostle Simon Peter. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. It is basic interpretation and strictly taught that this passage upholds a chair of final authority. Those keys Christ gives Peter comes with a level of authorial change, meaning that as the lineage of popes follow back to the apostle Peter, the same lineage of popes have the God-given authority to loose and bind. Just with this verse alone, we find that he is not merely the guardian of the church under God, but can enact and erase policies as Jesus gave Peter the authority to loose and bind. So it kind of gives some leverage to the modernist viewpoint. And we even see this type of authority enacted throughout history. It has been upheld and affirmed by successive generations of Catholics, theologians, and church leaders. The fact that the papacy has lasted for so long is proof in itself that it is a respected institution. There's a reason for that. It is noted in the following verse of Matthew 16:18, as Christ continues to address Simon Peter, that "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." So you need to have a little bit of theological analysis to understand this. But the gates of hell will never prevail against the church and her teachings because the Holy Spirit guards her. So as long as God protects the church, which of course will be forever, nothing bad could ever cause it to crumble. And there's actually a really interesting point made by Jimmy Akin from the Catholic Answers podcast based on this. If Vatican II did something against dogmatic teaching, the gates of hell would have prevailed against the church, which Jesus said would never happen. Therefore, the Pope's authority to enact policies during Vatican II can be justified as a continuation of this tradition that has lasted so long with the guardianship that he receives from the Holy Spirit. I'd like to hope that every practicing Catholic would agree that the teachings of God are good in the fullness of the truth. These teachings are defined as dogmas, an established teaching that cannot be changed. To reject the authority of the papacy that the Holy Spirit protects is to reject dogmatic teaching. And this is ironic because with basic critical thinking, one can see that traditionalists are teaching undogmatic truths by telling the people to reject the Pope's teachings. How can one advocate to bring their perception of the fullness of the truth back if they are rejecting a good chunk of that truth? I hope you all know who Bishop Robert Barron is. You may have seen his videos in catechism school, his Twitter, or even the Daily Wire show. He says something really interesting in his website, Word on Fire, about those who reject Vatican II. Disagreeing is not a valid option for Catholics. To ignore, disparage, or reject Vatican II is to call into question the living teaching authority of the Church itself, which was given by Christ and is accomplished by the Holy Spirit. It is to place oneself in a dangerous spiritual attitude with respect to the fullness of the means of salvation, the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, by setting oneself above its magisterium as judge. What he means by this is basically, one's opinion is not above the holy magisterium that Jesus implemented, and that the Holy Spirit protects. One's duty as lay people is to have humility and accept that these teachings, which were upheld by a huge majority of the Council, are good and true, no matter one's personal feelings. Denying yourself is a big tenet in Christianity. In Proverbs 3, verses 5 through 6, it says to trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not in your own understanding. In the Gospel of Matthew 16, verses 23 to 25, Jesus says to his followers, "If any of you want to be my follower, you must stop thinking about yourself and what you want. You must be willing to carry the cross that is given to you for following me." Now, of course, there are many separate teachings that are related to this verse, but it can be applicable in this situation. We need to deny our own understanding and trust that the Holy Spirit is guarding His church. Our next section is on the evolution of church practices. I think history is our friend here, because we can also note that the Second Vatican Council is not the first time changes in worship have been made. In fact, the papacy itself has evolved over time. Despite the Apostle Peter, the early church's first pope, being married, since 1139, popes and the clergy have practiced celibacy, as they are symbolically married to the church. Where is the traditionalist uproar? Banning marriage, I imagine, would have been a huge deal back when that was implemented. And again, drastic changes aren't new to the Catholic faith. Another example is the evolution of language said in Mass. For example, the first Mass celebrated, known as the Last Supper, which Jesus performed himself, was said in his Aramaic language. During the time of St. Paul, Mass was practiced in his Greek language. Within a couple of centuries later, the Catholic Church adopted Latin. So as we see a progression going on, it undermines the idea that not all tradition is necessary. For the last section, we will address traditionalist concerns. Now, the traditionalist viewpoint hasn't lost its entire bit of credibility. As the Catholic Church upholds centuries worth of traditions, it does seem like a harsh turn to just erase rituals as if it was nothing. And no one can just suddenly adapt from what was taught or practiced from the longest time. Traditionalists teach that this new order can be seen as a betrayal or even break from the Church. Post-Vatican II practices such as the transition from Latin to vernacular languages and changes in liturgical rules are perceived as erasing reverence that is inherent in strict adherence to tradition. This loss can be seen as a diminishment of Catholic identity. Now, I am no professional theologian, so I can't say for certain if Vatican II is the main culprit behind why this generation is pretty godless in my humble opinion. However, there are a few factors traditionalists have to keep in mind. Number one, it's biblical prophecy that it's only going to get worse as time goes on. In 2 Timothy 3:1, this know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come. And also, you really can't blame others for why someone is not as reverent anymore. It is ultimately the responsibility of the individuals to uphold their own faith and strive for their own spiritual growth. So if you can't tell already, I'm more on the modernist side. Although I have many disagreements with traditionalism, I can say that it is sad to see many traditions go. People hold much reverence for a reason, and they can serve as a part of the Catholic identity. But at the end of the day, it is also Catholic tradition to respect the final authority that the papacy holds. My feelings for other traditions doesn't mean much in a tradition of the papacy, but within the ongoing dialogue between tradition and modernity, we still need to seek unity. For ultimately, it is through the synthesis of tradition and renewal that the Church continues to proclaim the timeless message of Christ to the world. But yeah, I feel that's like all I need to say, and I hope we can find a peaceful state of the Church in the future. We are universal after all. Catholic in Greek literally means universal. We are meant to be universal to the world, so we must seek unity. I hope you enjoyed the video. This topic and Christian theology in general is something I'm really interested in. If you have any questions, comments, or even concerns, you can always DM me or somehow contact me. I also want to point out a disclaimer that I am in no way a theologian in the slightest bit. All of this information that I just spat out is surface level or even intermediate level theology at best. So if there's an error in understanding, please let me know. But overall, that is it. I hope you have a blessed day in the name of the Lord, and peace be upon you.